Hi everyone. I hope you are well and welcome to this live conversation we're having on this beautiful Wednesday afternoon. Welcome. And if you're watching this as a replay, welcome to you too. It's a pleasure to be convening with you all here. And for those who are here live, please just let me know if you can hear me okay. And then we'll get into the conversation for today. Right? So some of you might have seen that I'm going to be hosting a free webinar series at the end of this month on the 25th, the 27th of November and the 2nd of December. Right, so this webinar series is going to be focused on how to heal after pregnancy loss, right? And in our live space today, we're going to be having a voice conversation on what this webinar is about, what has inspired this webinar series, what you can expect from the series, and also what you will receive should you choose to join us. All right. And for those who are seeing me for the first time, my name is Dimelo Mareri and I am a Botswana-based womb healer. And through my current body of work on healing for pregnancy loss, I support women who have experienced pregnancy loss to heal and dissolve the impact of the loss in their lives, right? And this body of work is actually what has brought us to this webinar series. And this webinar series is specifically for women who have experienced loss and want to heal, all right? And so when we speak of pregnancy loss, we are talking specifically about a miscarriage or a stillbirth or an abortion, right? And a huge part of why we're having this webinar series and why we would even want to do a live stream on this, right, is because while this experience is one that affects and impacts a lot of women in our communities and in our society, it is an experience that we don't speak much about. So for a lot of women who move through this experience, they move through it mostly alone, right? And without much conversation happening around the experience, either to acknowledge the experience that they have had or to validate the impact that it's having in their lives, right? And so, yes, that's a huge part of why we're doing this, although it's not the only reason why, right? And in addition to this webinar series being for women who have experienced loss and want to heal, this 3-part webinar series is also for all women, whether you have experienced loss or not, women who want to reclaim this wisdom around one of our key rites of passage, and that being pregnancy. All right. So our key rites of passage include our first menstrual experience, our first sexual experience, pregnancy, birth, postpartum, menopause, right? And we are finding that pregnancy loss sits around the rite of passage of pregnancy, right? And unfortunately in our world, like, there isn't a lot of education around these key rites of passage, like real grounded education for women to know what's happening in our bodies and for us to know what we should do, right, should a loss happen, right? And we're saying that we want to reclaim the wisdom because this is wisdom that used to be actively present in a lot of our indigenous communities, right? But that has been increasingly being forgotten, right? With colonialism, modern times, etc., right? And I know that oftentimes when I speak of indigenous communities, we tend to look down south on the African continent, right? Even though there are indigenous communities in all parts of the world, right? There are indigenous communities in Australia, there are indigenous communities in North America, there are indigenous communities in South America, and in Europe as well, right? And even for the people who migrated from Europe going to America and other different parts of the world, when we go down, when we trace the lineage and the ancestry, we do find that there is at some level an indigenous community that they are part of, right? So I'm sharing this to say I believe each one of us can find some belonging in an indigenous community and an indigenous society somewhere. Like it's not reserved for the select few, you know? And I'm highlighting this because I've had a conversation with one friend of mine who's American, you know, and we're really having a conversation around essentially around who has a claim, you know, to being part of an indigenous community, to having access to indigenous wisdom, you know? Yes. So we are reclaiming this wisdom because it used to be actively present in a lot of our indigenous communities, right? With very specific processes and very specific protocols that were done to support a woman who had experienced loss, right? And there were these very specific protocols and specific processes because there was an appreciation of loss being a big experience in the life of a woman and in the life of her body and in the life of her womb, right? And one that therefore required recognition and attention, right? For her to be able to process this experience and to integrate it in her body and in her life, right? And even without looking at indigenous communities or looking at what's present there or what used to be done, we ourselves as individuals can feel the significance of this experience, right? We can feel it in our lives, we can feel it in our bodies, and we can feel it in our wombs, right? And so there is this invitation for us to grow in our appreciation of the significance, the bigness of this experience in our lives, right? And I just wanted to add that with this recognition or appreciation being absent in our collective society, we find that it is the individual women who experience loss who are in the aloneness aware of how significant this experience is, right? And a part of what's missing for me, what I have recognized as part of what's missing in our society is this recognition of the significance of the experience in her life, right? And the validation of the impact that loss has in the life of a woman, right? And yeah, this is part of why we're doing this work, right? To affirm and to validate your experiences, to validate the impact that loss has had in your life, right? And given its significance, given its bigness in our lives, and even in the life of our body, even in the life of our womb, this is an experience that can have an impact on various aspects of our lives, which our elders were intuitively aware of, right? In which they attended to. And I say they were intuitively aware of it because it's so interesting. Like when you when you have a conversation with our elder, is like they will have a whole protocol, you know, without necessarily having noted somewhere that this is why we're doing this, you know. Like in my Setswana tradition, like they used to be, the wisdom is still there, you know, but the practices not necessarily. But there used to be specific protocols for a couple, you know, and that took care of the tension that might build up in an intimate relationship once loss has occurred, you know. That took care of the challenges or the unspoken experience between partners, you know, after loss has occurred, you know. So yeah, just sharing that to say deep appreciation for the wisdom of our elders. Yes. Yeah, and it's such a pleasure, it's such an honor to share this work, right? So I was saying that given just how significant this experience is in our lives, it is one that can therefore have an impact, you know, on various aspects of our lives. And looking at the wisdom in various indigenous communities, like this is something that our elders intuitively knew, and that they intentionally and diligently attended to, you know. And another thing that has been emerging as I've been looking closely at, you know, like the practices like within various indigenous communities and traditions, is that there seems to be an appreciation of loss as a birth experience, you know. So this is the idea that really pregnancy starts with conception and ends with a birth process, regardless of whether that birth experience or that birth process happens at the 9-month mark or the 6-week mark or the 12-week mark, right? It's the idea and really the lived experience that pregnancy starts with conception and ends with birth, however that birth might look like, you know. And so this then answered the question of how do we care for a mother whose baby is not here, right? How do we care for a woman who has experienced a birth process but whose baby is not here, you know? It's a different kind of care, right? And one that has to be very specific to the needs of somebody who has moved through a birth experience, somebody whose body has moved through a birth experience, but her baby is not here, right? we find that in a lot of indigenous traditions, like they have very specific protocols and very specific processes to support somebody who has had that kind of experience move through and integrate that experience, right? And speaking on the impact that loss can have in our lives, right? It can have an impact on our emotional and mental bodies, right? In the form of the emotions and the thoughts that will emerge after the loss, right? It can have an impact on the well-being of our spiritual body, of our spirit person, right? And even the spirit of our baby, right? And so then there are very specific processes that need to be done to lay the spirit of the baby to rest, right? I'm mentioning all of these because this is what we're going to be deeply unpacking and exploring in the webinar series, right? And yeah, this just serves as kind of like just an introduction of what it is that we're going to be exploring in the webinar series, right? And the significant experience of loss can also have an impact on our womb or yoni space as the physical space where this loss occurs, as the site where the loss occurs, right? And it can also have an impact on how you feel about your body. It can have an impact on your intimate relationships and also on your spirituality or relationship with God, right? And so in the webinar series, we're going to go even deeper, looking at what that might look like and what the healing work is, you know, should you find yourself experiencing any one of these, right? And yeah, all of that to say, or all of that just to highlight the significance of this experience, right? And the impact that it can therefore have in our lives and on various aspects of our lives, right? Yeah, please let me know if you have if there's anything coming up for you, or if you have any questions, right? And so it is because of this deep appreciation maybe that I have come to, you know, around the wisdom of our ancients, around the wisdom of our elders. It is because of that our webinar series will therefore then focus on and explore the indigenous knowledge and the psycho-spiritual healing perspectives on how to heal after pregnancy loss, right? And like just through my own healing experience and through my experience as a healer, I have also come to see the beautiful marriage of indigenous medicine and of this, what I will call psycho-spiritual healing, right? And the psycho-spiritual healing speaks to healing that happens at the level of our emotions, at the level of our mental thoughts, at the level of its somatic work, at the level of our physical body, and at the level of our spirit, right? And so I've come to see just how beautifully they complement each other, right? Such that we could do a physical cleanse with indigenous medicine, and would still also need to support you with some emotional healing work, right? With healing work that also supports you psychologically to rewire whatever limiting beliefs or limiting stories you might have formed about yourself in the experience of the loss, right? Yeah. And that's true. Like, a lot of our indigenous wisdom around this has been lost. I like to use the word forgotten, because I believe we can still reclaim it. I believe it's wisdom we can still find if we are diligent enough to look, especially now, like, while a lot of our elders are still around, and when we can still ask them and document this wisdom, right? Yeah, that is true, right? That there is a like a bypassing, or that as you say, that women are expected to move on or be grateful that the pregnancy or the baby did not survive, right? So even if somebody were to be able to feign gratitude, right, the emotions don't lie, and the impact on the mental body, it also doesn't lie. The impact on our spirit body, it also doesn't lie, because and I'm connecting it to what we said earlier about how there are specific processes that need to be done to lay the spirit of the baby to rest, right? So whether we're grateful or not, there's still that aspect that needs to be taken care of. And the reason why we're needing to lay the spirit of the baby to rest is because, so when one has conceived and they're expecting a baby, it means that the soul or the spirit of that baby is in transition, right, from the heavenly realms into the earthly realms, right? And so when loss occurs, it interrupts the journey of that spirit, right? However way that this loss might occur, right? And so there needs to be ceremony, sacred ceremony, to really lay the spirit of that baby to rest. So I agree, painfully so, that a lot of this wisdom has been forgotten, and a lot of us as young people have turned our backs, on the wisdom. And I think I want to say I'm happy to have you all joining me here and being interested in this work, right? Because it means that we can begin to get some really beautiful healing work done, right? And I know that I started off speaking more to the indigenous medicine aspect of this work. However, additional to that, there's also the psycho-spiritual healing aspect that we're being invited into, and that we're also going to be exploring in the webinar series, right? And so, as I mentioned, the psycho-spiritual healing speaks to the emotional healing, and the emotional healing is for the emotions that will emerge as a result of the loss, or as a result of how the loss occurred, right? And so in the webinar series, we're going to unpack this more, really unpack the emotions that can emerge, and also highlight what the healing work for this is, right? Yeah, that is true. That it's difficult because no one is guiding us, right? Um, yeah, but there is some good news. The wisdom, it's finding its way back, right? It's finding its way back. Yeah, true. You know, in the form of this live stream, in the form of the webinar that we're going to be doing end of this month, where we ourselves can begin to capacitate ourselves, where we can begin to learn this wisdom, and where we can then become the wisdom keepers of this wisdom to then support our nieces, our young sisters, even our cousins, right? Really, in African society, our cousins are really our sisters and our brothers. But yeah, so with there being a gap, because where I see the gap, it's really it's like in the generation before ours, right? Because for me, in our lineage, my grandmother knew, but my mom does know, but not so much. And it's not a conversation that has happened in our nuclear family, all right? And so we're finding that this current generation that is watching this live stream and that will potentially attend the webinar, we're therefore then holding a sacred invitation for us to learn this wisdom for ourselves, for our children, and for their children, right? And so, yeah, let's begin. We begin with the webinar starting on the 25th, right? And we can become those sacred wisdom keepers of the mysteries of the inner lives of women, right? Of the mysteries of the inner lives of our wombs. We hold that sacred invitation, right? To be that bridge that has been missing for us, right? To become those teachers, to become those wise elders that we have deeply craved for, that we have deeply longed for in our society and in our families. So it is a painful experience not to have this guidance in our families, to move through these experiences without the guidance and the support of those who should have held those spaces and those roles, right? And with that missing, the question is then, what is this inviting us into? What is this inviting me into if this is an education I didn't get in my family, right? Maybe it's inviting me to learn and be that source of wisdom for others, right? Yeah. So, yeah, we were on the psycho-spiritual healing aspect of this work, right? Which, yeah, we're definitely going to unpack more in our webinar. I wanted to just touch on the psycho-spiritual healing aspect, and this is specifically for the mental thoughts, for the beliefs, limiting beliefs and limiting stories that we might form about ourselves, about our bodies, about what this therefore means for me, or what this therefore means about me, or what this therefore says about me as a woman, right? So the psycho-spiritual healing, rather the psychological healing aspect of the psycho-spiritual healing work speaks specifically to that, the limiting beliefs, the limiting stories that might form, right? And the somatic work is specifically for the impact of the loss that sits in our physical body, all right? And then the spiritual healing work is for, like, to tend to the well-being of our spirit, our spiritual being, and also to the spiritual impact of the loss. Phrased another way is to tend to the impact that the loss has had in, I would say, like in our spiritual universe as individuals, our spiritual universe together with the spirit of our baby, and also our spiritual universe as a lineage, right? The spiritual healing work takes care of that, right? And so it's 4 things under psycho-spiritual healing. It's emotional, psychological, somatic, spiritual, right? And through the webinar, we will also extend this to the impact that the loss can have on key areas of your life, right? Including your womb or yoni space, including your intimate relationships, including your relationship with your body and womb, and including your spirituality or relationship with God, right? And yeah, in the webinar, we're then going to be looking at the healing work that is needed for these aspects of your life that might be impacted by the loss, right? So it might not be all of them, but however way, like as you're listening to this, you might start to be able to notice, the ways in which your specific experience has impacted your life, and so that's where the healing work will focus, right? Yeah. Okay. And I think oftentimes we'll keep saying this. I think oftentimes, like we don't do the healing work around this because we don't know what needs to be healed or how it needs to be healed. I think for me growing up, I used to, like, there was a vague, like very distant knowing that cleanses used to be done for women who had experienced loss, although I didn't know in great detail, what those cleanses were for, or whether they were physical or internal cleanses, and it was only when, like, I started growing, like, in my spiritual journey and also in my path as a healer, that I started to know the specifics of the work that needs to be done, like the specific protocols and processes, right? Yes, sharing that to say, as we're listening to this, let's also have compassion for ourselves, right? If you're listening to this and maybe it's been a while since you experienced loss and you haven't yet done any healing work around it, right? Sharing this to say, let's have compassion for ourselves, because yeah, oftentimes we don't know what needs to be done, and we also don't know where to access this healing work that needs to be done, right? Because in our African societies, we would know of some woman somewhere who supports women in these ways, and we might not be able to readily access them, yeah. But as scripture says, the scripture likes to say good news, right? The good news is that we find ourselves with this opportunity to gather in circle end of this month, starting on the 25th, to deeply dive into this conversation and to deeply explore and unpack what needs to be healed, how to heal, and also where to access this healing work, right? And so, as we are slowly nearing the close of our conversation, um, part of how you can know you need to heal after loss is okay. Before we get into that, let me just speak to this question. It says, in termination of pregnancies, how does this impact the mother and her lineage, right? So, like with this work, we have brought together these three experiences of miscarriage, stillbirth, and abortion because they are closely related, although each one of them is very unique, also at the same time, right? And they're similar in terms of how the experience itself will impact the different layers of the being of the mother, like when we look at the emotional impact, there will be an emotional impact, there will be a psychological impact. The loss will also be felt at the level of her body and at the level of her spirit, right? However, like it's nuanced, right? Such that the emotions that a mother might be left with after termination of a pregnancy are slightly different from that of a miscarriage, right? And so, number one, there will be that impact at a psychospiritual level, right? In terms of the emotions she might be sitting with, how it might impact her mental landscape, how it might impact the impact that might be left or the imprint in her body. And when it comes to the spiritual aspect, right? So with the termination of a pregnancy, this is a choice that is made by the mother and not necessarily something that happens spontaneously, right? And so remember how earlier we spoke about loss being an interruption in the journey of a soul as it was, let's say, descending to the earthly realm, right? With a termination of a pregnancy, it is the mother who herself is interrupting that journey, right? And so the spiritual aspect of the work is going to be slightly different, right? In the sense that there might need to be some like self-forgiveness work, right? For the decision made and therefore the impact, right? Because we have interrupted the journey of the soul, right? And there might also be need to be an interaction with the spirit of the baby, right? Forgiveness work at that level and a releasing at that level, right? So I'd say the difference in terms of the impact is because with one, it's a decision that has been made, and then with the other two, it's something that occurred spontaneously, right? And then in terms of the lineage, it is really that should it be something that we live unattended to? Should be something that we don't attend to. It means that within the mother's own spiritual universe, there remains that imprint of the loss or the imprint of the termination that has not been attended to, which therefore also sits within her lineage. right? And it's really like the energetic debris that is just present within her spiritual universe and the spiritual universe of her lineage. Yeah, I hope you've been answered. Please let me know if I can speak more to it. Yeah, the impact is also on her womb space, right? Again, as we said, given that this is the site where the loss occurs, right? And so there needs to be a womb healing that happens for the womb physically and also energetically, right? And so I was I'm recognizing that I kind of like clumped them together, and I did that because there are similar experiences. However, we also need to hold the appreciation of how uniquely different they also are, you know. Yes. Oh, I'm glad you've been answered. Yeah. And I think this is something we can also explore more in the webinar. I'm sure more will come up, more will emerge as we prepare for that experience, right? Yeah. And so, speaking about terminated pregnancies, I think this is actually a huge, I mean important conversation, because I think given how much of a taboo topic terminated pregnancies are, and also how much shame there is around this experience, we find that a lot of women who have terminated pregnancies can end up not seeking and not receiving the healing that they need, you know, out of fear of being judged or out of fear of being shamed for their choices, right? And so I just want to say that this is a shame-free space. Even the webinar series is a shame-free space, a judgment-free space, because what we're interested in, Rona Helaha, what we're interested in is the healing work that needs to happen so that we may heal, so that we may thrive, so that we may be able to build the beautiful lives that we desire for ourselves, you know, and for the world, right? So, yeah. That felt that felt like it needed to be said. It still feels like a very important conversation that we should probably have at some point, right? Yes. And so as we near the completion of our conversation today, I just wanted to say that part of how you can know you need to heal after loss is if, one, you're sitting with difficult or dense emotions connected to the loss, right? So if you find that you're still sitting with some difficult emotions somewhere, some dense emotions somewhere that you know are connected to the loss, this is definitely an indication that healing might be needed, right? And number two, of how to know if you might need to heal after loss is if you're experiencing dis-ease or pain around your womb space or around your yoni space, right? So this might be physical pain, and you will know, you know, like you'll know if this started to emerge after the loss, right? So it might be physical pain, or it might be pain in the form of, like our reproductive health. It might be reoccurring infections that started to emerge after the loss, and that is then an indication, part of an indication that healing might be needed. And this would specifically be womb healing work, right? And number 3, part of how to know if healing is needed after your experience of loss is if the loss has affected how you feel about your body or about your womb. You might find yourself just not feeling so nice and not so good, in your body or about your body. Like in the case of a miscarriage or a stillbirth, there might be an experience of feeling betrayed by your body, or having lost trust in your body to be able to carry a baby to term, that would definitely be an indication that some healing work might be needed there, And in the case of a terminated pregnancy, I like with this one, right? There's often the sense of that one might have stained their body, or that one might have stained their womb, by terminating a pregnancy, and that therefore informs how we feel about our body and about our womb, and can also seep into our intimate relationships. It can therefore influence how we show up in the world and how we show up in intimacy and in our intimate relationships, right? Because we experience intimacy through our bodies and through our yoni space, right? And healing might also be needed if you're experiencing challenges in your intimate relationships or in your love life after the loss, right? You might begin to notice a pattern, right? That such and such happened after this experience took place, right? This is just an invitation to just go reflect and see what might be present or active in your life, right? And healing might also be needed if you have a strained relationship with God after the loss, right? And in the webinar, we're going to unpack all of these, right? I just thought to share that so that we may begin to see the ways in which the loss might have impacted your life, right? Which would therefore then serve as an invitation into this healing work, right? And again, as scripture says, the good news is that healing is possible for all of these, right? As we will see, as we will explore in our webinar series. And if any one of these speaks to you, I definitely would love to invite you to join us on the 25th and the 27th of November and the 2nd of December for this webinar series. On day 1, we're going to be exploring in depth, we're going to be exploring the psycho-spiritual healing that is needed after pregnancy loss, and extending that to how loss can impact the key areas of your life and the healing work that's needed, right? On day 2, we will explore the indigenous medicine for pregnancy loss, and on the landing page of the webinar, I speak to in the holistic postpartum care that can support your holistic healing, right? And so I want to mention that the indigenous medicine is not only for postpartum care, it is also for your womb, it is also for your spirit, for your spiritual body, right? And on the 3rd day, we are going to be having an emotional healing experience, right? It felt fitting that we conclude the webinar by experiencing some of this healing that we're speaking about. And so as a group, we're then going to immerse ourselves in an emotional healing experience, just to release and clear some of the emotions that might be sitting in your body or your womb connected to the loss, right? Yes, and if absolutely any of this resonates with you, I invite you to join us. The registration details are in the link in my bio. So if you go to my bio, there's a link tree there. Click on it, and the link for registering for the webinar is right at the top of my link tree, right? And another thing that I wanted to share is that when you register for the webinar, you will also receive discounts on my healing offers. So you'll receive a discount on my consultation session, on Sustain. Sustain is a 3-session healing protocol for pregnancy loss. You'll also receive a discount on Enliven. Enliven is a 12-session healing program for pregnancy loss, right? And it's for Sustain, it's a $111 discount, and for Enliven is a $300 discount, right? In the consultation sessions, you'll be able to access them at $55, right? Mentioning this so that, because I know it can be helpful to know beforehand, right? And I will share more on these like on the first day of the webinar. And just sharing this as a heads up for you to know beforehand. Yes, that it would be such a joy to have you joining us. Thank you. Yes, and lastly, if you know anyone who might benefit from this or who might need this, please definitely share this news with them about this webinar that we're having at the end of the month. Again, there's really that invitation for us as women to, like, additional to the invitation for us to heal and thrive, there's also the invitation for us to reclaim this wisdom for ourselves, for our children, and for our children's children. And part of what deeply excites me about this work is the prospects of us becoming the wise elders that our communities need as a result of having done the healing work, and also as a result of having received the growth and the transformation that is available to us when we do the sacred healing work, right? Yes. Thank you so much, for sharing. That would be absolutely and deeply appreciated. Thank you. I think that feels complete. Yes, that feels complete. So I look forward to seeing you at the webinar end of this month. And if you have any questions at any point, please feel free to either share in the comments or a DM. It's such a pleasure and such an honor. Until next time, until we see each other again, take care. Okay.